If you've met me before, raise your hand if I work with your teams, right? So for those of you who don't know me, the parents that I didn't already meet, my name's Coach Mike. I'm one of the directors in a company called Wrestling Mindset. Recently, in addition to Wrestling Mindset, we actually now work sports-specific in 7 other sports. So last year, we worked with 3,500 athletes in 7 different sports. Michigan is not only my favorite state, but one of the states where I personally have the most clientele. Last year, 3 of the teams that I work with made it to the state finals. 2 of them were state champions. Very thankful to be able to work this past year, like I said, with all of the teams in Michigan. I've had the chance, just for some of the people in here, to work with CC, Dundee, Clinton, Heartland, Michigan State, Adrian College, Central Michigan, Bronson, a ton of really awesome Michigan schools and a ton of awesome Michigan athletes. So I say that all to say, not to scratch my back, but I think it really is a reflection on how great of a culture you guys have. So one of the things that we talk about at Wrestling Mindset a lot is the importance of gratitude. So hey, everybody, do me a quick favor. You don't need to read. Here, everybody, eyes up. You don't need to read this right now. It's going to become relevant in a little bit. Number 1. Number 2, I don't need your head up the entire time, but I do definitely need your ears open. I want to make sure that the stuff that we're talking about today, I see in the room, right? So I just want to make that clear. So don't go grab your phones. Don't go get busy talking about something else. Give me 30 minutes of your undivided attention. Parents, would you agree that it was pretty worthwhile when you guys got a chance to listen earlier, right? So I want to give you guys some knowledge so that you can be more recruitable in 30 minutes than you were 30 minutes prior, okay? So let me say that again. The stuff that I'm going to tell you, you will be more recruitable in 30 minutes from now than you were recruitable at this moment, all right? So a couple things. Like I said, Wrestling Mindset. It's a wrestling-specific mindset training program. We work with colleges, high schools, professional athletes all over the country, from youth through the Olympic level, over 35 guys in the UFC and Bellator. Again, Michigan of all states. If you haven't seen me, you probably know what and who Wrestling Mindset is. I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here because I really appreciate the culture that Michigan wrestling has. I travel all over the country. So prior to Wrestling Mindset, I was in the FBI for 7 years. In the midst of being in the FBI, I opened up my own wrestling club. When I moved from the East Coast to Houston, while I was in Houston, I had 13 kids in the state finals in my club one year. Only 4 of them won. 9 of them should have. 5 of them just didn't show up. We all know or have been those kids, right? Where we were supposed to win and we didn't. We lost the guys we shouldn't. We treated that match special. Whatever. We shouldn't perform the way that we needed to, right? So I looked for a solution on how I can better help my kids. So reason I'm saying that is that I'm not coming to you as a guy that works for the company. I was a client first. I was a wrestling coach that had really good kids or kids that wanted to be better and needed to find ways to be more successful, that me, as a guy with a background in crisis negotiation, surveillance and forensic accounting, and all the FBI criminology background that I had, I couldn't get through to my kids, so I had to find a solution. Wrestling Mindset was really helpful for my kids. Fast forward a couple years later, I left my job at the FBI to be with Wrestling Mindset full time. So again, if you didn't already understand like the kind of high-level teams and kids we work with in your own state, last year, to give you some perspective, like I said, 3,500 athletes, 6 college national champions, 40 college All-Americans, Division II national champions, St. Cloud State, 5 Fargo champions. One of my personal clients was the Junior Fargo OW. I say all this to say that like what we do works at the highest of levels, and maybe you aren't those guys. It also works at the kids who are not chasing those titles. Maybe they're looking for a winning record. Maybe they want to win the varsity, they want to make the varsity lineup. Maybe they want to be a state qualifier, right? There's different types of kids that utilize mindset training, different types of teams, right? We're either looking to get to the next level, right? We're trying to close the gap on better competition, or we are the best competition and we want to stay there. So that's one of the reasons why, like me personally, over the last 2 years, I've worked with 4 teams in the top 25 in the country. Why a number of kids that are ranked top 10 in the country seek us out because they're trying to find ways to get better, not just at wrestling, but in other areas of their life, right? So my goal is the same as yours, right? Same as your parents, same as your coaches. We want to maximize our potential using wrestling as the vehicle. So we teach you how to do that, right? This isn't just some motivational speaking. I wouldn't leave my job to be my job at the FBI to just motivate you guys. Our goal is to give you tools to help you perform better in wrestling and take those lessons, perform better in the other areas of your life. So I was telling the parents, when I was 22 years old, I interviewed for the FBI, and I was interviewing against a doctor, a lawyer, a rocket scientist, and a detective. Not kidding. I was 22. I was a college grad, right? So on paper, I didn't belong in the room with those people. It's kind of like being an unseeded kid and drawing the number 1 seed first round. On paper, you're not supposed to win that match. But I didn't focus on how good their resumes were or what they did. I focused on what I can do with the opportunity that was directly in front of me. So what did I do? Like in wrestling, right? I kicked the door down. I didn't hope to score points, right? I created opportunities for myself. I didn't spend that interview trying to beg them for a job. Please, 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 this is what I've always wanted to do. I promise I'll do a good job. Trust me, I promise I won't let you down, right? I didn't tell them, I didn't tell them to take a chance. I told them why I had value. What am I saying? If I was caught up in the stuff and how good my competition was, I wouldn't have focused on how good that I can do in that interview. So because I crushed that interview, it changed the rest of my life. I crushed that interview because of the things that I learned in wrestling, right? So I'm one of the directors in the company. There's 60 other coaches around the country. Like I said, we work in 7 other sports. Spent a lot of time here in Michigan. I'm here for 5 days, twice in the fall, just so that I can try to visit all of my schools and some of the new ones if I can. So while I've been here, we work with Michigan State, Alma. Those are 2 places that I made stops. I visited Aries. Where are the Aries guys? Aries guys are Lowell guys. I visited there the other day. I'm staying at Nick Simmons' house. Like, I love Michigan wrestling. I'm not even from here, right? So I grew up wrestling in New York. I'm a wrestler just like you. This is from wrestling. This is from jiu-jitsu. I coach 6 days a week. I still run my club. So my point is that I'm as deep into wrestling as you are. So I never had these opportunities when I was going through the recruiting process, right? I was sending VHS tapes to coaches, hoping that they opened them in their mail, right? And then sending them emails on our like AOL accounts, right? You guys don't even know what half that is. So point being is that I want you guys to be really grateful for the opportunity to be here. Those of you that we work with your teams, or you've heard some, about the mindset principles, we talk about being thankful for the opportunity to wrestle, right? So wrestling is not something that you have to do. It's something that you get to do. That sounds like some, motivational YouTube BS. But when you talk to the guys at Penn State, right, they'll say the mental edge of that team is gratitude. That is not something that I can just talk to you about. I could teach you how. Your coaches can work on ways to make that happen, right? But gratitude is the mental edge of that team. So my point is, without getting into too deep as to how to go about doing that, when you're here, soak every inch and every second of opportunity that you have to be in front of college coaches, because we never got that shot. If it wasn't at a national tournament, right, then we never got the opportunity to be in front of a bunch of college coaches, right? We also didn't get the chance to learn about this process. We had to ask friends who went through it and try to figure it out. We didn't have Google. Like, we didn't have the opportunities that you guys have. Soak it up. Don't take it for granted, okay? Today, like I said, I wanted to kind of give an idea of what we've done, the type of people that we work with, so that you understand why you should be listening to me during the time that I'm here, all right? Ultimately, what is mindset training? Right? Why do kids that are number 1 in the country, or NCAA champions, and UFC fighters, why do they work with us? Why do youth clubs work with us? Why do other sports work with us? We teach you how to focus on the right things to be successful, right? When you focus on the right things, it's way easier to be successful. There's this little trick that I do balancing a stick on my hand that shows you how it's without the stick in front of me. Essentially, I would be balancing a stick here. If I focus on the bottom of the stick, I'm not going to be able to balance it. I'm going to look really silly in front of you. As soon as I shift my focus to the top of the stick, I balance it, no problem, right? It's a lot cooler when you see it. The point being is that when you look at this picture, one person is focused on the right things, one person's focused on the wrong things. One person's focused on himself, the other person's focused on other people. One person's focused on the things that he can control, the other person's focused on the things that he can't. Right? So I'm not here to talk to you for 30 minutes about mindset training. I'm going to help you crush one particular process that I think will help you wrestle better in 30 minutes, right? And I want to just remind you of how important it is being strategic with the way that you think, right? So, we talk about, through mindset training, we can weaponize our mind. something that the guys at Dundee, that their coach says, you know, through mindset training, they're able to relax in high-pressure situations. I want you guys to think of the last time you were in some high-pressure wrestling situations, and were you able to have that sort of emotional control? Because when, like their coach says all the time, when your mind's available, you can do a lot of great stuff. That's why 2 years ago, we had 2 NCAA wrestlers that were unseeded win national titles. Let me say that again. We had 2 unseeded NCAA champions in the Division II tournament. You could probably count on 1 or 2 hands the amount of time that that's ever happened. We had 2 in the same year. They both walked off the mat, talked about mindset training. They talked about being thankful for the opportunity to wrestle. If you go look at Coach Mitch's testimonial, talked about how reminding you guys how wrestling is fun. It's something that you get to do, not something that you have to do. Think about what the stuff that what we always hear about at Penn State. People are like, man, those guys are having so much, fun. Because wrestling is something they get to do. They love wrestling. They're not focused on wins and losses. They're focused on the reasons they love wrestling and their purpose behind why they love wrestling. Raise your hand if faith is important to you. Everyone that raised their hand, that actually means that you have a mental edge on your competition. You don't have to be religious to be successful, but those of you who live a faith-forward life, right, your purpose is usually to glorify God with the talents that you have, right? So point being is that you're not worried about, you shouldn't be worried about winning and losing. You should be focused on giving your best effort, having a consistent attitude, like positive attitude, being aggressive, right? So between now and 30 minutes from now, I'm going to give you 2 simple processes to crush. Don't be caught up in like, ooh, these guys are watching. I have to do really well. They don't care about how good of a wrestler necessarily you are. How do I know? Because Coach Borelli was in my room and we were running a practice and we were talking about like, hey, what are the things that you want to see from these wrestlers? And he's like, well, I don't care how good they are at wrestling. I want you to make them tired, get them frustrated, and see how well they respond under pressure. Like Coach said, fatigue makes a coward out of everybody, right? So nobody cares what you do when you're not tired. Nobody cares when you beat the guys you're supposed to beat. How do you respond under adversity? Because those are the guys that could be a lot more successful. How do we do that? Again, through mindset training, it all comes down to being able to focus on the right things. So when you go to your next session, your focus should not be on winning that go. Your focus should be on giving a maximum effort, giving everything that you have. Show that even if you're tired, you're still going to work hard. Show that no matter what the score may be, that you're more focused on staying calm and collected and having your mind available, right? Not getting frustrated or pissed because you just got taken down. Show that you're willing to take chances. Because if you're firing off tons of shots, you're going to get to his leg a ton of times. You're more likely to score. Matches are won 80% of the time by the guy that scores first. Not because they scored the first 2 points, but because they're more aggressive. College coaches want aggressive wrestlers. They don't want guys that want to win 3-2. They want guys that are looking to blow matches out of the water. So think about this. How many of you won matches by a point or lost matches by a point that you could have won by a lot more? Okay? How many of you lost matches last year because you beat yourself? Right? You look at this list right here. These are a whole bunch of lists. I know some of you have a winning mindset. Some of you have a wrestling mindset. The wrestling mindset red flags are all specific to our sport. Not pulling the trigger, giving good guys too much respect, wrestles too cautious and hesitant, afraid to lose or make mistakes, practice room wrestler, chokes in big matches. Again, I'm not here to give you a comprehensive explanation of what mindset training is, right? What I want to help you do is remember that if we can learn or create a better process for ourselves to focus on the right things, it's way easier to wrestle our best every time. That's the goal, right? We want to wrestle our best every time. Versus a lot of you are inconsistent. Some of you wrestle good some days, some of you wrestle bad some days. You don't really have an idea as to why, right? But that doesn't make any sense. That would be like having a good lift one day and a bad lift another day. That typically doesn't happen. The reason that doesn't happen in lifting is that you have a system behind the way where your coaches train you when it comes to lifting. You don't have a bad lift or a good lift unless it has directly to do with maybe what you eat or didn't eat. Okay? But when it comes to the way that we think or the way that we perform, right? Some days we're awesome, some days we're not. You don't have a clear example as to why. If you want consistent performances, you need to have consistent thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Because the way that you think will influence the way that you feel. The way that you feel influences how you perform. Your performance is what ultimately determines whether or not that you're successful. So what does that mean? If I think that because this guy's seated higher than me, I feel like he's better than me, I'm not going to wrestle well because I don't believe that I can win. Versus if I think that I don't care who's in front of me, I feel like I can beat anybody, so I'm going to wrestle my best. Now, like I said, it's not just about damage control. We work with so many top teams and top guys because it's about, can we wrestle to the highest of our potential? So, like I said, I promised you that I was going to help you you were going to be more recruitable at the end of this than you were at the beginning, okay? The things to focus on for your next session, it's not whether or not you're winning the go. It's not showing off to coaches. Give a full effort, okay? Show coaches that even if you're tired, you're giving a full effort. When you get taken down, come right back up. When you get a takedown, look for a turn. Have a consistent attitude of trying to attack, which comes into the next thing. Be aggressive. No coach wants to recruit a conservative wrestler. They want to recruit somebody who's aggressive, who's willing to take chances. The best example of that is Jason Nolf. So some of you have heard me talk about this a couple times through our team sessions, right? Jason Nolf got taken down twice in the Big Ten finals a couple years ago. And after the match, like, he majored the guy, but he's like, man, how'd that guy score on you? They're like, he took you down twice, but you still majored them. He's like, well, I wasn't really worried about getting scored on. I was more focused on scoring points. So when it comes to focus, are you more focused and worried about getting scored on? Or are you worried about scoring points? How many of you get caught up worried about getting scored on? Let's try this again. There's no egos here. How many of you get worried about getting scored on? Right? So keep your hands up. How many of you last year had matches where you didn't pull the trigger? How many of you lost those matches? Okay? So keep your hands up. Those of you that just had your hands up, look around. We all go through the same stuff, man. Different teams, different individuals struggle with different things. There's different mental muscles and strengths and weaknesses, just like there are physical. Some of you have weaker legs and stronger upper body. Some of you have stronger upper body and weaker legs. So some of you don't struggle with pulling the trigger, but you lack motivation. Some of you lack motivation, but you're really confident, right? So we got to figure out how to build ourselves up where we're weak and figure out how to make where we're strong freaky. It's no different than technique. So effort, attitude, aggressiveness. That's your focus, the next one. If that doesn't jive with you, focus on this. Breaking your partner, improving your position, and scoring tons of points. Again, nobody wants to recruit a guy that's conservative. They want to see a guy that's willing to put it on the line, right? You can fine-tune all the technique, right? Wrestling's a very simple sport. You're trying to beat up the other guy in front of you, score a ton of points, right? And constantly improve your position. Simplify your thought process. That's what this essentially comes down to. Simplify your thought process. So for some of you, who has a 3.5 or above? So when I tell you something that's process oriented and hey, like focus on these things, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to plug my goals and what I'm good at into that process. Boom, I see results. I get it. The rest of you, maybe it's not as easy for you to digest that sort of thought process, but the point is when you focus on process, the outcome takes care of itself. When you worry about wins and losses, when you worry about how well I do today is going to determine how recruitable I am, right? You're more likely to fail versus just focus on wrestling hard, giving your best effort, having your mind available, right? Being aggressive. Does that make sense, guys? All right, so simple thing that I'm going to help you for those of you, because that was most of the room, that said you lost matches last year because you struggled to pull the trigger. Maybe it was because you treated the match significant, right? It was in the state tournament or a national tournament, a nationally ranked kid, a kid that beat you before, whatever the case may be, right? Those of you that had raised your hand struggling with the idea of pulling the trigger, especially, like I said, when you need it the most. If you struggle with pulling the trigger, you struggle with one of three things. So be really self-aware of yourself. Be really self-aware of yourself. Be very aware of yourself right now with what I'm about to say. Number one, do you know what your best moves are? Okay? Raise your hand if you know your best moves. You know all your go-to stuff. Okay? I'm not going to ask you, or for those that didn't raise your hand. Most people in here, if they're looking to wrestle in college, they likely probably know their top 3 moves in each position, right? But at the same time, do you know all your go-to moves in every single position? Do you know your technique like the back of your hand? Okay? So if you don't, you're going to struggle pulling the trigger. You don't know what to do. Imagine it was a 3-2 count in the World Series, bottom of the ninth, and you're a pitcher and don't know what your best pitch is. Right? Again, it sounds crazy to think, guys, I've been in Division I college rooms, and in the middle of the thing, I'll be like, what's your number 2 series on bottom? What is it? Too late. Too late. You don't have that kind of time to think in a wrestling match. You know what I mean? So I'm not singling you out or making you feel bad, but that's the kind of time that we have to react in a wrestling match. We need to know it that quick. Like I told you, I've been in Division I rooms where the same thing happens. Because in the middle of the state finals, right, when you're losing and you have to win a position, you can't have 3 seconds to think about it. Feel me? So clarity. Number 2, confidence. Do you believe that your best moves can beat the best kids? Raise your hand if you believe your best moves can beat the best kids in the country or in the state. Okay, so that's about a third or 2/3 of what we raised our hands before. So you know what you're best at. You believe that your technique will work, right? Now, there's 2 things that get us next. And I was talking to the parents about this. A fear of making mistakes or losing, or giving good guys too much respect. How many of us last year gave an opponent too much respect? Okay, we know that that's not what we're supposed to do, but we did it anyway. Mindset essentially is what makes the difference and changes that gap. Again, especially for those of you kids that are like competing for state titles, national titles, right? It's not as much about the damage control and the mistakes that we make as much as it is making sure that we can compete our best every single time. Because a college coach doesn't care that you beat the number 10 kid in the country when you lose to some scrub at a local tournament. You're not consistent. He doesn't want you if you're not consistent. If you want to consistently perform your best, you need to know how to consistently get the best out of yourself. Make sense? Right? So, wherever you fell in that process, knowing what your best moves are, believing that you can beat the best kids with those moves, or third, having a fear of failure or making mistakes. Fix those areas, and you'll be more willing to pull the trigger. Right? The other part, like I said, is maybe giving guys too much respect. Maybe you don't necessarily feel fear of failure, but you give guys too much respect. So because you give that kid too much respect, you wrestle cautious and hesitant. You don't take chances. So what happens? You lose a 1-point match that you could have scored a lot more points. You win a match 2-1 that you could have won 10-2, right? We've all been there. All right? So, again, when it comes down to focusing on the right things, it's not just about wrestling. It's about school, and it's about life. I talk about this a lot. Like, the stuff that you learn or don't learn in wrestling will affect you the rest of your life. Okay? I'm telling you, if you can learn how to crush your process in wrestling, you'll be way more successful in school, way more successful in life. Do you guys understand? All right, so I'm going to finish up with this sheet right here is a pre-match routine. Most matches are won or lost in the 30 minutes prior to. Routines quiet the mind. Routines also get you properly physically and mentally warmed up for your matches. Everybody look at me. How many of your warm-ups look like this? That's bullshit. Like at least half this room. Okay? Right? So point being, most of us, our warm-up consists of a lot of bouncing around and a lot of stuff that we don't do in our regular practices. Okay, I'm giving you guys some value for making your way out to this combine, right? This is something that we literally sell by itself on our website. It's the only worksheet for the first 5 years that we in existence that if you didn't sign up for an individual or team program, you can buy by itself. In 1 year, we sold 2,500 copies just of this one worksheet. So I'm giving it to you guys because clearly you're invested into making yourself better to be more recruitable. You want to win more matches, crush your warm-up properly, right? The way that you warm up for the state finals should be the same way you warm up for a kid with an 0-20 record, right? Every single match is treated the exact same. Every match is the state finals. Every kid's a state champ. It doesn't matter who he is, where he's from, what the tournament is. You treat him the exact same because if he's not as good as you, you'll smash him. If he is as good as you, you'll be able to give him a really tough match, right? And then better wrestler wins. The goal, guys, is that, again, compete your best every single time so that if you lose, you get beat at wrestling. That's how you hear guys like Mark Hall, Jordan Burroughs, Kyle Snyder, Helen Maroulis. When they lose, They're like, what does this loss mean to you? And they're like, nothing. It's just wrestling. Like, I lost a wrestling match. I'm happy with my effort. I got no regrets. Okay? Fear actually only comes in when you have a lack of preparation. Nerves don't exist. And for those of you that have worked with me for 2, 3, 4 years, right, you understand that the cotton mouth you get, the accelerated heart rate, the fact that you got to go to the bathroom out of nowhere, it's not nerves. It's your body going into fight or flight. My point is, when you learn to crush the process right before you wrestle, you're exponentially more likely to be successful. How many of you feel like an improper warm-up caused you at least one loss last year? More than one, more than two, more than three, right? So my point is, if you want to compete your best, you better warm up in a way that's the same every time, that's systematic, and that's going to get the most out of you. It should look a lot like practice. So again, we're not going to do it together because I'm not going to have the time to run you through one, but I'm pretty sure when you guys get ready to go live, I'm going to give you a 5-minute version of what we call a shotgun routine, right? It's, you got 5 minutes or less to warm up, like you missed your name on the board, right? Or they skipped the weight class, whatever it may be. Boom, you got 5 minutes. What does that look like? Okay? But a full warm-up should be about 25 to 30 minutes, all right? And it should have these 4 elements. Dynamic exercising, right? So like gymnastics, jogging, sprinting, stuff to get your body moving. Element of fun. Think of practice. Oftentimes we play games. Why? Takes the edge off. You need to do something in your warm-up the same way. Deep breathing, right? Deep breathing. At the end of your warm-up, that's when you slow your heart rate down, take yourself down a notch, right? And then drilling and hand fighting. How many of you legit, before every match, drill and hand fight? Raise your hand if you've been through a practice where you didn't drill or hand fight before you went live. Not a lot. Probably 1 out of 100 practices, you don't drill or hand fight before you go live. So my point is, crush your warm-up, you're way more likely to be successful in your match. Kind of like in wrestling. Coach, I couldn't finish my shots. They weren't there. I'm like, I bet you your setup sucked. Right? It's not your finishes. Crush your setup and your shots will be there. Trust yourself. Trust your setup. Don't look for the perfect opportunity. How many of us don't shoot because we're waiting for the perfect right opportunity? Wrestling is like a very basic sport. Get your hands on them, move your feet, make them tired, pull in the directions that you want. Does it make sense? Right? So I didn't spend the time to do this with you because I wanted to give you some other value. This literally will be a game changer for 80% of this room if you take it seriously. Okay? You're going to plan out exactly what you will do before every single match. And you will do it every single time. In the beginning of the year, all the way through to your state championship. Your warm-up won't change, so you're going to have consistent thoughts. You will have consistent feelings. It'll all feel the same, so that when you get on the big stage at Ford Field or Wings Event Center for your team state finals, you're going to feel the exact same. Because like I said earlier, when our mind's available, we can do great work. When it's not, kind of like rolling the dice, you know what I mean? All right? So, again, really thankful for Mitch and JJ for making me a part of this event. Thankful for you guys for giving me your attention. Like I said, we never had these opportunities. We had to hustle to go get recruited unless we were blue chip recruits in the country. Unless you were winning national titles or on the national circuit, you had to hustle and sell yourself, right? So soak up the rest of the time that you have here today. Effort, attitude, and being aggressive. Breaking guys, improving position, scoring points. Focus on what you're going to do, not what they're going to do. Don't worry about getting recruited, worrying about winning the next position, and then the next position. 15 seconds at a time, okay? Do not worry about getting recruited. Worrying about have fun while enjoying a great opportunity and scoring a ton of points, all right? Thank you, guys.